Hello and welcome again to Emotionally Speaking. I'm Carla McLaren and we have a doozy this week. It is white privilege. Now, as a sociology major, I learned about privilege first in the real place that it actually came from, which is sociology. So when I saw people getting completely riled up about the concept of privilege, I was like, what is going on? Because privilege means something so specific in sociology, and it's such a brilliant concept that I don't know why everybody doesn't love it, right? The problem is that many people were taught about the concept of privilege by people who were telling them like this, and people who didn't totally understand it themselves. So let me tell you, before we get into all the emotions about it, let me tell you what privilege is. It is simply, and it's you should never know that you have privilege. If you know you have privilege, it's not privilege. So it's a secret, invisible power that you're born into. You have nothing to do with it at all. There's no part of it that you chose, and there's no part of it that you worked for, and there's no part of it that you are aware of. If you're aware of privilege, it's not privilege, right? So I will name some privileges I have. I have white privilege. I am probably the whitest person you'll ever meet. I have no other ancestry except white Europeans. It's a terrible thing. But basically all my ancestors from BC times, right, before Christ, they would just find the most pale person in the room, right, and they would say, "Can I see their veins? I'm have babies with that one," right? So I have tremendous white privilege, but there is nothing that I did except to be born to my family to have white privilege. And what that means is that I can go into places here in America anyway, which is a primarily expectation of whiteness country. Let me explain what I mean by that. And I am sort of welcome everywhere. Unless I'm in a very kind of unusual place, like say a church where I don't belong, or a neighborhood where whiteness is not the expectation, right? But generally I can go anywhere and do anything I want simply because my skin is white, right? I also have educated privilege, and a part of education is something I earned, but also I was born to parents who really valued education, so I have a good vocabulary. I can read whatever I want to read. I can argue with people and know that I'm going to be making some form of sense, right? So I have all sorts of things that I was born into. I have used to be pretty privilege. I have California privilege, sort of things where I had nothing to do with it. I was born in California. I was born in this white body. I was born into a family that valued education. I have middle class privilege. I was born into a family that was moving from the lower classes, from the blue class, into the educated class. So here I am. But there are plenty of people who are just as smart as I am whose family was not making that transition, right? And so they didn't get the opportunity to go to school in the way that I did. It was difficult. I put myself through school. I struggled. It's still privilege, right? Privilege is not about something that you have done and you intended to injure others. And I think that's what a lot of people hear when they hear white privilege. They hear that I am privileged. And I can look at my own experience. I was poor, I was homeless, I was in a battered women's shelter. I struggled through college so hard, and I barely had food to eat, right? So if someone said to me, "You have educated privilege," I'd be like, if I thought it meant that I was privileged and that I was like thinking so well of myself, then yeah, I would get really angry. But that's not what privilege means in this context, right? And in the comments below, I will put a link to something I wrote about privilege called How to Be a Privilege Trader. Because The trick with privilege is not to throw it away. I cannot throw away my whiteness. This skin does not come off, right? Well, I probably would. But if I've got privilege and I didn't earn it, and my white privilege is just the fact of my whiteness is a problem to people of color because of what I call the expectation of whiteness in America, right? Most of our media is based on white characters. Most of our news is focused on whiteness unless there's crime among people of color, and then we focus on that a lot. But we have different names for mass murderers who are white and Christian than we have for mass murderers who are people of color, right? There's an expectation that whiteness is normal and it's regular. If you want to look at white privilege, go to the Band-Aid section in your store, and you will see that flesh tone is white, right? In some stores, you're going to have like this, like, here's the whole Band-Aid section, and here's the part where there's some darker brown Band-Aids. There's an expectation of whiteness. Whiteness is the norm, okay? If you want to look at white privilege, go to the Target in your in your town, and you will see a shampoo aisle that is, 2 aisles long. So much shampoo you cannot even decide what to get. You just go there and you're like, what? And then go look for the shampoo for black hair. In our town, which has an African American population, in our Target, there are 2 massive aisles of shampoo and conditioner. And there is a piece this big on 2 shelves that is for any kind of black or ethnic hair. It's tiny. And I went, okay, so that is what white privilege looks like. It's not people hurting other people. It's people making a tiny, tiny little place in these massive aisles for a community that exists here in my community, right? The African American community. There are hair needs here that are not being met, and massive amounts of white hair needs that are being met, because whiteness, there's an expectation of whiteness. Whiteness is considered normal, right? That's privilege. And it's not something that I do to anyone. So I don't have to get riled up about it, right? It is something that is a part of whiteness of which I am a member. And so if I have this privilege that I didn't earn, that I actually kind of don't want, right? But I can use it, then I can become a privileged trader and decide what I want to do with this power that I did not earn, but I got it, right? So what can I do with it? And that's what how to become a privileged trader is about. So looking at white privilege in the way that many social justice people throw it at people makes the whole concept fall apart, and it makes it into a personal failing that you have done, you bad white person. And let's face it, white people, we've got some really bad white people in America. We've got some full-scale racists, and people who think Hitler's awesome, and people who believe that somehow black Americans are less intelligent than white Americans. It's nonsense. If you have even Sociology 101, you would know why the scores are different, right? In the cases that they are, why the IQ scores might be different among a black population than they might be among a white population. There's a lot of issues of poverty, basically, and lack of access. So these scores, this isn't just math. You got to put some sociology and anthropology and an understanding of the social world underneath it to understand what these numbers mean, right? So the concepts of privilege, instead of treating it as something to be ashamed of or to be angry about, right? Instead of trying to set boundaries around your privilege or who can tell you you're privileged or getting all fighty about it, find every bit of privilege you have, everything. That if you can read, you have a privilege that many people don't have throughout the world. What about tutoring people with this privilege at the local library? That would be a freaking awesome way for you to become a privileged trader. Or you could say, a privileged giver, whatever. I like trader. That's just me. How can you take each area of your privilege and contribute to a better world for the people who don't have this privilege? Here's another privilege I have through no fault of my own. I am heterosexual. I have heterosexual privilege. And so as a person whose sexuality is never, it's the expectation of heterosexuality. It's just like the expectation of whiteness. Heterosexuality is normal and everything else isn't, right? So I have privilege here that I can use to welcome my LGBTIQA, brothers and sisters, and to make a space where there's inclusion, and that I would always make room to the extent that I can. I am in the what is normal place, so I might say things that are insensitive, and I hope to goodness that someone within the community that I may have inadvertently offended can say, well, Carla, that's not a good word. And I was like, what did I say? And then I figure it out, right? And what that is my ability to work with shame, right? So what I see with a lot of people when they hear white privilege or male privilege or heterosexual privilege or educated privilege, they think that people are saying that they have more than others, that they didn't struggle, and that they're actually intending to hurt people. Right? That's not what privilege is. That's not what it is. And if you heard that that's what it was, the person who told you was not right. So they don't have privilege anymore to talk about privilege, right? You never did a thing to earn your privilege in this sociological sense. And there's nothing that is coming off of your body that is trying to hurt others in this sense, right? Understanding privilege as just the place you were born, the body you were born in, the situation that you found yourself in. That yes, you're special, and yes, you worked hard, and yes, I'm sure that you suffered. But the privilege is still there. And the expectation of whiteness and heterosexuality and being able to speak with a good vocabulary or whatever it is, whatever the expectation is, and you're in there, what I'd like you to do is open it up, look at whatever privilege you have, become a privileged trader or a privileged giver, and make the world a better place with this power that you have, right? It's power. So use it for good. Emotionally speaking, being able to work with your privilege is being able to work with your healthy shame and to see the pain and the trouble all around you and not to come out fighting and telling people to stop having pain and trouble, right? How does that work, right? But it's to find a way to utilize whatever gifts you've been given, whatever magical privilege, fairy dust has been put all around you, and use it for the good of humanity. Now that's a privilege you can earn. Thanks. I'll see you next week.